Welcome Unity fans to another update on the Unity UI Extensions project. This is update 2.0, our uber major mega masterful. Yeah, you're going to hear that a lot in this video. And this is the biggest update we've had to the project probably since its inception. There's so many changes, so many new controls, new features, fixes, you name it, it's in there. We've revamped a lot of the project, including the documentation, the examples, literally tons of stuff. And we're going to go through some, but probably not all in this update video, just to give you a good taste. You can then go and explore the project, download it, and use it to your heart's content. As ever, I'll follow up some update videos for some of the major components that have been added in this release, so there's dedicated videos for those. But check out the new docs. They've had also a major rework in this, so there's tons of information in there. If I can, we'll go into a little bit of information here. So for those who don't know me, I'm Simon Darkside J. You can pretty much find me anywhere on the interwebs as me. I've written a few Unity books, which most have said are quite good, so read them if you wish. If you don't, I'm not going to be hard. So let's go on with the update, he says. So as a little bit of a history lesson, it's been a while since we've done any sort of big project video itself. The Unity UI Extensions project was created when I first started writing my first UI book, and basically there was a load of scripts on the interwebs. The Unity UI system was new, there was people looking for it, there weren't really many assets, and so I thought to myself, let's get out there, get all the best scripts out there, put them tightly into one package, contain them so all in one namespace, the Unity UI Extensions namespace, and make sure that it's all tested, roadworthy, and actually good to use. There were a few other scripts which weren't great, and they never made the cut. So it's all community driven, so all these scripts are being either created by myself or by other members of the community who've willingly and donated it to the project. So if you see them around, give them a shout. Everyone's name is all on the top of all the scripts. And the project has been growing and growing. Now we're over 70, possibly even 80 scripts, controls, effects, and other such UI goodness that help you out to make your UI really shine in your project. And one key point is the fact that the project, being open source, is free. It will always remain free, but obviously we do need to keep working. So we are open to contributions, whether it's code, whether it's cache, whether it's issues, whether it's documentation. Please someone help me with the documentation. It's the hardest job of this because most controls don't come with any, so I have to craft them all. You'll see a big change with the update 2.0. We're expanding how you can get access to controls, giving you more options to be able to contribute if you wish. I stress it is free. If you don't want to or don't have the funds to simply donate to the project, don't. I'm quite happy for you to use them. If by chance you start to make millions on your project and you'd like to throw some away, I'd appreciate that too. But anyway, so the project itself is on Bitbucket. We're now using the Git source control to make contributing a little bit easier. We were originally using another source control project, but we've abandoned that because people came knocking and screaming at my door and said, can you please use Git? And I must admit, I prefer to use Git anyway. You look on the site, you can get to here is bit.ly/Unity UI Extensions, all lowercase, and you'll find the project. In here you've got lots of information. There's all the source, all the activity, there's also the wiki, which is where all the documentation is. We've looked at using another website, but to be honest, there's no point. Everything's here. We've got discussions, issues, you can see the code, you can see what happens to the project, it's all there. The other resource we have obviously is the dedicated Unity UI Extensions YouTube channel. In here you're going to find our videos, including this one, over the history of the project, including some dedicated walkthrough videos which are generally by request, or if I feel inclined to sort of say, here's how to use one of the controls. Most of the documentation will contain little mini videos for how to set things up, but generally these site videos are more for intensive looking at this is what we're going to do and see. And you can find that there at youtube.com/c/Unity UI Extensions. I don't think it's case sensitive, but you can try. Or if you simply search for Unity UI Extensions on YouTube and you'll find us. Everything's there. You can comment and help or watch videos to your heart content. We do actually also have a new Gitter channel. which is gitter.im/Unity UI extensions/lobby. And that's more of a hangout place because one of the issues we saw through the life of bringing up the 2.0 release is that people want to get in touch. They wanted to chat. They want to raise issues. And I was getting them on YouTube. I was getting them on Twitter. I was getting them on BitBook. They're all sort of over the place. So Git is our new friendly place to go and chat. And if you want to raise an issue or raise a request, then do it on Bitbucket. You can comment on YouTube, fine, but generally speaking, don't put issues on there because I don't always watch it constantly. Although I do respond to every single comment. Whether it's good or bad, I don't mind. But anyway, so this is what we're looking at today. This is almost everything. I can't actually fit them all on here now. This is what the Uni extensions were before the 2.0 update. So you can see there's a ton of stuff here from independent controls, primitive drawers from for drawing lines, shapes, some layout controls for controlling how you lay out things, a bunch of effects, some VR components. I'm not really going to shout too much about those, and a ton of additional components who are either helpers or other changing things. But as we move into the update 2, the update so big they named it twice. It's just big. I don't know. I suspect the amount of work I put into this 2.0 release has probably sent me a little bit loopy, so help, please. So there's been a whole load of major changes to existing components. So the line render, for instance, has had a huge amount of work done to it, simply to improve its texture drawing, its positioning support. There's even now editor handles for positioning your lines. You can have dotted lines. There was just a ton of things people keep asking for to change in it. It's quite useful for just drawing the odd lines how you wish. The only downside is that Unity itself as a 3D engine isn't made for drawing lines, which might sound odd. Even if you use the Unity's own line renderer, you'll notice the fact that it doesn't draw a straight line, it draws it sort of jagged. So if you want to improve the quality of the line like you do with the Unity's own 2D, 3D line renderer, you need to use some kind of anti-aliasing or dithering support from a shader to simply make that line even finer if that's what you need. We've added tons of features so they can improve the resolution, how many quads a line makes up, but it does appear that no matter how much you do, it is going to look still a bit jaggy if you get really, really, really close. But if you look in the docs, there's lots of information there about how to use that for the best. One of the key controls that was added in one of the recent releases was the Reorderable list. This is great for dragging and moving things around between lists, and it now can work in both Screenspace. It can also now work in Screenspace-Camera and Worldspace, and still work with all the event triggers. There was a few issues in its initial release, but they have been overcome. One of the two of the most popular controls, the horizontal and vertical scroll snaps, have had some extra love and attention to them to make them work that a little bit better. They're now dynamic. They do be filled programmatically. So if you want, you can just keep adding items to the list, and there's a bit more scaling and extra support for how they work. So worth checking out the updates. And there's been a raft of other little minor updates to all the controls, tidying them up, clearing up namespaces or misspelled usings or things like that. They're just little things that have been there, but effectively the code has been gone through with a fine-tooth comb to make it the best it can be for update 2. I'm not going to say it's absolutely perfect because you're looking at the one-man band who puts it all together. Even with all the controls that get contributed, they do need a lot of love and attention to put them into a single, solid, tested, workable solution. But as we move forward, update 2, ton of new things. So there's a new selectable scalar, so the fact that it's a select control that works with all the scalar controls that are in there. There's a bunch of new text effects for doing things like monospacing, line spacing, different kind of spacings. A multi-touch scrollrect. Yeah, there's simply an extension because the existing scrollrect only really handles one touch. If you use more than one, it basically ignores it, but this exposes additional touches are in there. There's a new little primitive control for drawing a grid in the background. It's not a layout, it's just a grid, so it draws lines the way you want it. It extends the line renderer, so it shows the power of taking even the existing controls in the project and extending them to do what else you want. Another one of these is basically the new UI line connector right down the bottom here. So that takes the line renderer and allows you to draw lines automatically between different UI game objects, automatically. I still think there's some room for improvement on that, but as its first release, it's pretty solid. There's some really new cool effects. So there's the curly UI if you want your UI curvy. So you'll basically put that on pretty much anything that's graphical, so either text or a canvas or a raw image, and then you can basically manipulate the points of how that's displayed. This is brilliant for sort of VR scenarios where you need more properly curved texts, but I guess it'll take some fine tweaking because it's pretty much a manual process at the moment. I think I'd like to see this extended so that we can apply curves to the Bezier functions that actually place it, so they can have a more uniform curve rather than just randomly placing the actual items. There's also a new fancy scroll view. Now, be warned, this isn't for the faint-hearted. This is a fully programmable scroll view with intrinsic animation support. I mean, if you look at the examples, they're impressive, and what you can do with it is impressive. But there's a fair amount of code you're going to have to go through to implement this. It's not an off-the-shelf like most of the other controls. You do have to build it yourself. There's a few extra things. So one of my controls I've actually had in this release is the cooldown button, simply because one of the games I'm working on, I need to have a cooldown button, so I can click it, it'll cool down before I can click it again. You can then link it with image effects or the soft alpha UI image or anything else to apply a gradient or some effect on top of the image while it's cooling down with value, and extra event support. If you click it again while it's cooled down, you can do something to the user if they're being impatient. Don't have to, is there? There's some iOS style controls. So there's the stepper and the segmented control, which they're meant to replicate iOS controls. So there's like an up, down, plus, minus button, and then there's a way to lay out buttons side by side in a continuous image, just if that's the kind of thing you want. And there's a few other little things like the UI highlightable control. So if you need highlighting support on a panel or background to show the users interacting with that at that area, you can do. Lots of good fun. But that's enough talking. Let's actually get on and show some demos of this all working. Right, so here we are, we're in Unity, and I've got my little project up. And interesting side note, the fact that here is, I'm using what's called the Slides of Loki. It's a nice little GitHub presentation suite for inside Unity. Although I've updated it to make it more UI focused. You can see this a little. This is the actual project itself for doing the presentation. So this is, like I said, there's no things here. This is all Unity, Unity, Unity. Forget all this PowerPoint nonsense. Let's probably do more. You can do some great things with that. But anyway, we're here for the project. So, this is taking a brand new project, and all I've done is imported the Unity UI extensions asset. Now, one quick warning. Since update 2 is so big, there were a few breaking changes, a few things we had to change around. So we recommend that you do remove the old Unity UI extensions folder before you re-import the new one. If you have made your own extensions or changes or tweaks, make sure you copy them out beforehand, or at least have a back of your project so you can get those changes back. But anyway, what we'll walk through here now is that in this release, we've had a ton of examples, simply because people keep saying, can you show me how, can you show me how? So we did. And for most of the major controls here, obviously not everything, just most of the major ones. So we've got a tester for the color picker, and each of these you can open them up. There are scripts in there for using if you needed to. With the color picker you don't. So we've got a nice Worldspace picker and a Screenspace picker. Handy little thing. Including the prefab for then adding that to your own projects. We've got an example for the combo box controls. And this is simply showing the drop down, the combo box, all the different little ways they work. You can see them in action, how they're set up, and all the little features that you can do with them. Okay, we got my new CoolDownButton effect, which is rather nice and interesting. So when this is up, it's a case of by clicking the button, you can see a nice cool down effect goes on, and we've got using different effects and different styles. So, you know, using the soft alpha UI mask to give it a bit more alpha blended effect, or the image effects just to cool it down, and even a nice little clicking on button way of working. And obviously, and then we got the new curly UI. Now this is where you really starts to see your UI bend. So each of these is just a simple control, and they've just simply had a different Bezier curve applied to each of the 4 sides. You know, this changes based upon where it is in the world. So if I look at this now, and if I go off to say this button, you can see I've got these editor angles for how I can change what the curve is, and it's per side or per vertex, as it were, and you can change dramatically how it works. And if you, in case you're wondering, yes, the button still works, so I can still click on it, I can still highlight over it, and everything you expect still works. It's just changed how it's rendered to the screen. The author has also added some little editor extensions to talk you through some of those setups. Another one, right now, I've mentioned in earlier that the fancy scroll view says, because you know this is a fully programmatic control, so it's not necessarily for the faint-hearted. It has some great effects, so you can like have a nice little fanciful way of doing things. There's just a basic one. Then I've got there's another one where using events, so you can actually click on and select items, not just have them passing by the screen. So this is the same as the previous version, except now you can actually select cells, or when cells stop they get selected and things like that, and events are fired and so on and so forth. Interesting note, the original asset didn't actually fire events off when it was just stopped on. Another contributor saw that, dug in and gave the fix straight away, which I'm very, very grateful for. I was busy working on the rest of the lease, and also then you can get even more nice. There's nice infinite scroll to effects, but there's tons of different ways you can do this. The author has provided some documentation with the control, but it's not in English, unfortunately. So if anyone has no option to be able to translate the documentation, I've done a fair amount of work in the actual docs site, which I'll show you at the end of these examples. If you want to help out and contribute to that, by all means do. All the code is commented as well. Okay, and so here we have the horizontal and vertical scroll snap demos. Now this isn't to be confused with the other scroll snap controls that we have in the project. So we've got the fixed item scroll, which is commonly referred to as the scroll snap. It's one implementation which works in one way. We also have the horizontal and the vertical scroll snap, which are 2 sister controls for both doing each directions, which are another type. And we also have the fancy scroll snap, which is the new programmatic control, which has obviously its own demos. So best not to mix them up. So here we can look at the actual main scroll snap demo scene, which shows off both the horizontal and vertical scroll snaps in action. So we have one, which is the horizontal scroll snap, which is controlled by adding content into the actual hierarchy in the inspector. Then all the configs read from there, and then we can go forward, back. We can now use a scroll bar, which is new in this release, and also move by touch. And there's even fast swipe controls. You notice this also has a linking for the basic pagination controls, which allows you to link to a group of toggles, and it will follow which pages are actually selected. Over here, we've also got the vertical scroll snap, which is actually implementing some other features. So there's actually a more programmatic way of approaching this. So we've actually defined all the children in here, and they're initialized only when the scene starts. This also has masking and a few other little features built into this to make it a little bit more useful. Also, in each of these controls, we can add new pages, we can remove pages, we can jump to pages, either in code or through the UI. It's up to you. We've also added this a nice little full screen demo because some people have asked about it. There's a few. I've probably been tinkering around with this, so there's testing, adding animations in, showing how to show more than one control on the screen, but basically a full screen implementation, how you can tweak and choose it how you want. And also, in a very late release, there's a new pagination manager, which is sort of an extension to the scroll snaps, which allow you to have sort of either, again, linking to a toggle group with a bunch of toggles, but instead of using the native implementation, this overrides it. So that also gives you sort of a click pagination feature. So it controls what toggles on, how clicks work. But honestly, everything else in the control still works, and it recognizes what goes on. And this is utilizing all the events exposed by the scroll snaps and just better integrates with them. It's also a good example of looking at the script of how that works and what it does. Okay, so one of the other demo scenes we've got here is that at Unite there was a great little session about building dynamic menus, and I was also heartily impressed by this, so I contacted the author and actually said, can we put that into the extension project? And they went, sure, and here it is. It needed a little bit of work because it was very programmatic before, but it's now been built into a more generic style menu system where you've got the menu manager, you put all your screens on, and then it's controlling how all your menus are working. Granted, this is very basic. There's nothing over the top in here, and there's still a bit of programming involved to get it to work, but it's very easy to implement. Just check on the documentation, I'll walk you through. The simple thing with this is that for each menu screen, you're creating a prefab, and with that prefab, it's going to have a script, which is your menus script. And that script also must be called by the same name as your prefab. It's just a naming convention thing, because the code does some interesting things about looking for how that works. But then if you simply look at this script itself, again, it's very basic. It uses the classes that are in the UI extension project for the menus, and it's simply a case of having clicking events attached to whatever happens. So you look at each of these, they got different click events which you hook up in your UI, and they're simply calling the other menu. Now the brilliant thing about this is that it's completely abstracted, so you don't need to add a reference of that inside the menu to know the other menu exists. So if you then swap the menu out for another one, it just works. It's quite ingenious really, and just in its simplicity of how it works. So it's worth looking at and see how that is. Okay, next up we've got the Radial Slider, which is a funky little control. Most people have got the sliders for up and down or horizontal, but people wanted one that went round, and it's got nice little features. So you can have a color gradient on the actual slider itself, so you can say a start color and end color. If you want, you can keep them the same color so it never changes. And I've also gone a little bit further to also say, well, having lerping functions on, so instead of just dragging, it actually lerps. So you tap on an area and it goes. And then also you can do this programmatically. So I'm going to go to 0 degrees, or I can go to 0.7 fill effectively. So it works both ways, and all of this works through code. Nice and easy to use. Probably needs a little bit more extension in the future, to be honest. And we've also got the reorderable list. And here we have the reorderable list control. And you can walk through this, and it's quite advanced in what it can do. So we have different boxes set up. This is all the same control, and it's just got different options on. So is it draggable, is it not? So I can drag things out of here. Can I place them in here? But I can't place them in here. And they all resize how to things. So it's worth looking through these and just having fun. I can't drag out that one. Can't drag out there. I can drag out there, but I can't drop on it. Nope. Lots of different settings, and also things like, cloning. So does it remove an item from the list to add it again, or does it clone it because you're just copying things out to add more? Put lots of blue in there. There we go. There we go. Lots of different things. Right, next we've also got the scroll conflict manager. Now I'm going to turn some of these off because there's just lots in here, and some of them do get a bit confusing. But they're all different examples of different ways to set this up. And so the scroll conflict manager at the end of the day is a way to control how different scrolls work. And so you can actually do proper up and down, left and right. There's a dedicated video on this just to make your life easier. There's the selection box. This is something that's been in here since probably day one, and it's a handy little thing, and all it simply does, it allows you to do 2D screen space dragging and selecting of things around both, UI items, UI worldspace items, 3D items, and also screen space items as well. So it's a fun little one to play around with. Let's also maximize that as well. That's more fun. So you can see there's some screen space items, because it's within this bounded area that I can select in. It'll select it, but it can't select things over here, can't select other things over there. Have fun with it. Okay, and now we have the most fun one of these things. So if I look at this now, these are all the different text effects that we've got in the project itself, and I've also animated them to make them a bit more fun. So we can see we've got curved lines, we've got the soft alpha mask blending in and blending out, that one. Oh, the cylinder text isn't moving, but normally this in the demo this is rotating around, and you see the letter spacing, monospacing, different types of monospacing, gradient on text, go wild. We've got the line render example, which shows off all the different line renderer options we've got in here. So we've got the UI line connector here, which is, I've placed these objects and then they've got lines now being drawn between them, whatever color you want. I've attached a nice little circle class, which are just daft little components I put together, and then got it to draw a line using the circle generated by that class, and then also animated this little 2D object going around. Just fun can go around. But then you got the main line renderer here. Let's see, I can add another line in, and I'm going to get drawing. I have no idea. There it is. You can go drawing lines. So feel free to play with your heart's content. And last but not least, we got one of the funkiest demos, which has been in here a while, which is a implementation of the UI vertical scroller. There's actually several in here. So there are these things here. These are the vertical scrollers. And you can see nice little, lots of different events, a little bit of animation things. They're quite restricted in what it can do, but it just works. And this is a simple like calendar approach to how you can actually set these things. I think 1972. I lost the button for that. But anyway, you can play with these demos to your heart's content, see how they all work, and get on and enjoy the project. So let's have a recap and have a look at what else we can look at in this project, including the documentation. Okay, so I hope you enjoyed that update, and as we sort of trail out to this, last thing to check on before you sort of go away is the documentation. So as you can see here, if you go to the wiki, there's all details about the project, where all the controls are, and you can go into each of these areas. So we go into the controls, and let's pick one at random. Let's say the box slider. There we go. Nice random selection, honest. And this shows the new style of documentation. I recommend that everyone, if they do contribute controls or effects or things to the project, please also think about the documentation. We've got a standard format now for how the documentation works, with an example of what it is, the hyperlinks for all the sections in the document, inspectors, properties, usage, and demos if possible. So make sure that when you're contributing to the project, you're also then contributing some documentation, or at least give me a heads up of how to use it. There's been one or two controls where I've had to go back to the authors to ask them, how does it work? But hey ho. Go through there, support the project if you can, and I hope you all find the project useful. Please comment on this video or give us feedback on Bitbucket, or even chat to me on the rest of the community on Gitter. So thanks for watching, and hope you have fun with the project. Bye bye.